Hello, I'm Ken DeLuke, and welcome to the Turning Point Podcast, the bi-weekly program that features interesting people from all walks of life, addresses the concerns and events from the movers and shakers in your community, and provides a forum for you, the listener, to ask questions and share what keeps you up at night. To ask a question, please leave a voicemail at 312-866-7174. That's 312-866-7174, or leave an email at theturningpointpodcast.com. That's theturningpointpodcast.com. Now, your host is Mohammed Faheem, a candidate for the United States U.S. House of Representatives in the 8th District of Illinois. Mr. Faheem.
Thank you for the introduction, Ken. And if you could please introduce our guest for tonight.
This is the Turning Point Podcast. Tonight's guest will be Beowulf Rochlen, the former producer for the nationally syndicated radio Rick Unger Show and current host of one of the most insightful new podcasts, Facepalm America. Now on to the show.
Hi, Beowulf. Welcome to the Turning Point Podcast. I would like to talk to you tonight about what makes you, you. How did you get started in the business? What keeps you excited? What keeps you going? Welcome again to the Turning Point Podcast.
Well, my goodness. Thank you so much for having me, Mohammed. I really appreciate you having me, and thanks for those wonderful complimentary words about myself and the podcast, Ken. My goodness. So a little bit about my background. I have been in the talk radio and I guess more recently podcasting business for about 25 years at this point. I've been involved in syndicated talk radio on both sides of the political spectrum for quite some time, producing for conservatives, for liberals, and to encounter a few years back Rick Unger and work with him, a Democrat who is very open to speaking and having in-depth and productive conversations with conservatives and folks all across the political spectrum. It was really a treat for me to be able to talk with him and produce his program and occasionally fill in on the show for the 3 years that it was on the air and certainly in the Chicago land area. I live with my family. I'm nowhere near Chicago, as it happens.
Well, and thank you very much for inviting me on the Rick Unger Show quite a few times when it was on.
No, and it was wonderful to get you to know you as a caller and then as a guest. As it happens, it's hearing people from across the country. Rick was in New York. He still is. He's actually about to take the bar in New York and go back into the law practice as it happens. And I'm here in Southern Oregon. You and many of the people who called the show are in the Chicago area. I live with my family. My wife and I and our two daughters live in Southern Oregon. Since COVID, we've all been living together, and we've had an interesting journey over the years. My younger daughter has disabilities. She uses a wheelchair. She has cerebral palsy and epilepsy. My older daughter is taking community college courses and working towards becoming a nurse. And as folks who listen or used to listen to the Rick Unger Show may be aware, in September of 2020, in the midst of COVID, we had our house burned down in the Alameda fire. Wow. In Southern Oregon as part of some of the wildfires. And certainly a big part of that is caused by climate change. We had a couple of weeks of 100+ degree temperatures, which was very unusual for that particular time of year. And it was really I mean, we were very lucky. We lost our home, but we were helped by so many people in the community. We were able to purchase another house, rebuild our old one, and we just sold that in the last couple of months. But it is had a huge impact on the community in Southern Oregon where we live. Hundreds of people are still without homes, and now you see the situation in Colorado where they are experiencing something similar. So I guess one of the things that makes me tick, one of the things that keeps me up at night is climate change, how that is having an impact, a real visceral impact on people's lives as it plays out through things like wildfire, hurricanes, tornadoes, etc.
That is something that I'm also very concerned about. And most people don't seem to realize that, we have reached beyond the tipping point on climate change at this point. We have got to take drastic action. But let me ask you this. Growing up, what did you want to be when you grew up?
Well, there were a couple of things that I was interested in. I was interested in being a writer. I was a big fan as a young person of Dave Barry, the humor columnist. And I did that for a little bit in high school. I was very much interested in having a humor column. I also listened to a lot of talk radio growing up on stations out of San Francisco. And so I was eventually able to parlay that into basically what I'm currently doing, or in podcast form, what we most gravitate towards when it comes to audio content and conversation. So I guess I wanted to be in the media in one way, shape, or form. I wanted to communicate ideas. I wanted to make people interested, engaged, and maybe make them laugh a little bit.
That brings me up to a very important point in the conversation over here. We have all these politicians constantly coming on, and all they care about is winning the next election. Okay, they really don't care about you and I. They just want to be winning the next election, and that, I believe, is not the definition of a leader. A leader is somebody who is concerned about the next generation, what kind of world that he would want or she would want their children and their grandchildren to grow up in. And I don't see that in many or even all of the politicians that are there on both sides of the aisle. What do you say to that?
I agree. I mean, I wish there were a few politicians that were interested in losing the next election, frankly. I think whenever you go into public service, you have to define what your goals are. And if your goal is just to win, then you probably should not be in public service. That certainly isn't, for practical purposes, what you're doing. You have to decide what it is that you're trying to accomplish and try to do that. And if that means at some point that you're going to fight for something and you are willing to lose your position, you are willing to go before the voters and lose if the cause that you are fighting for is important enough, then I think that's fine. I think that's honorable. I think that's necessary. And to see that play out as we look at what's happened over the last year, and so many things blocked and impeded by Joe Manchin and the people who vote for him in his state of West Virginia, and how much they would benefit from something like the programs in the Build Back Better program. Mm-hmm. Look, I understand that he wants to win. I understand that he wants to get campaign contributions. That's part of our current system. But you would think at some point you would say to yourself, look, the people I represent actually mean something to me. The people I represent are important to me, and I want to make their lives better. I don't want to just make my life better because I'm part of the world. I'm part of my community. Yep. I am part of a whole. And when they improve their lot, I improve my lot. And if that means I'm going to, go down fighting against a Republican opponent who's very well funded, then maybe that's what I need to do in order to make sure that this passes. Maybe I need to take one for the team in order to make sure that the team, long run, succeeds.
That's so important. When I was approached by some of the people that I've worked with in the past to run for Congress in the 8th district in Illinois, my first reaction was, "Who, me? I've never thought about running, for public office. I've been doing public service for the last 20 years in the district." So the first thing that we decided was, okay, what's going to be our campaign slogan? And we came up with a campaign slogan. It's public service, not politics. And that, I think, is fundamental to how we need to view our life in this world that we have come into. I have a lot of respect for Adam Kinzinger from Illinois also, who kind of stood up for his principles against Trump.
Yes. No, I think it's amazing what he's done. I think it's amazing what Liz Cheney has done. To see that people like them and like Mike Pence, with whom I have profound political disagreements, for whom I have difficulty imagining that I would ever vote for, they nevertheless put their country, their community, above their immediate self-interests. I mean, so many members of Congress, so many Republican members of Congress have made the decision that because of the influence of Donald Trump and because of how powerful the gravity of his personality is, the dangerous gravity of his personality and his influence in elections, they've decided that they're going to, whether they truly believe in his approach to politics or not, that they're going to go along with it, that they're going to try and ride those coattails. And I think that is just tremendously detrimental and could undermine our democracy. It's already begun to undermine our democracy, and to see folks like Adam Kinzinger make their stand, even though their voting record would be very different than mine, and
Yep.
I'm sure very different than yours, Mohammed. I have a complete respect for him. He is a part of a system and a part of a community in which we can engage and debate issues and come to a consensus between ourselves.
Absolutely. So let's take a quick break, and on the other side of the break, let's talk about current events and what we can do about some of these things that we see going around us in the country. We'll be right back after this quick break.
Blue 6 TV. It's a new television channel on the Roku, Amazon Fire, Apple TV, and Android TV platforms, broadcasting old-time movie classics, television shows, and cartoons. And the best part, we are free. That's right, nothing, not a zero, with a big fat helping of no ups and no extras. You get our incredible programming 24 hours a day for free. But wait, how about our own programming? Yes, our own programming brought to you for the big fat price of bupkis, zilch, zip, nada, and most importantly, diddly squat. Grab that remote and jump onto your favorite Roku, Amazon Fire, Apple TV, or Android TV platform. Don't miss a minute of black and white film glory with cartoons the baby boomers grew up on. Join us as Blue 6 TV grows, and before the owner finds out, we are broadcasting it free. And remember, Blue 6 TV don't cost nothing.
Okay, folks, we are back after the break, and my guest today is Beowulf Rochlen, who is one of the producers of his own show, and it's Facepalm America. Is that what you call it, Beowulf?
Yes, we try to address politics and the culture of the United States with a bit of a humorous vein.
Okay. So talking about that, the politics and the culture of the United States, Today is the 6th of January, and it is the anniversary of that infamous insurrection in our nation's capital that was fueled by our dearly departed president. What do you think of it?
I believe that January 6th should be remembered as a day that will live in infamy. I truly believe that we should remember it and commemorate it in the same way that we do Pearl Harbor Day, because on that day we were attacked from outside forces. In this case, we were attacked by enemies of the state from within, and I watched that day, and it was just, I'll tell you, Mohammed, I watched C-SPAN. I've always been a political nerd from the time I was 10 years old.
Mm-hmm.
I watched C-SPAN, and I remember watching the House of Representatives pass the resolution on the Contras, and I've watched for decades and decades. And when finally in 2009, I was a bit of a late bloomer in actually getting to visit the U.S. Capitol, I was so worried. I went to my representative's office. They got us tickets to go in, and they closed the session early. I was so upset. I was so worried I wasn't going to actually get in to see them. Fortunately, we got back in the next day. But I feel such a deep connection in my heart to like the physical place on Capitol Hill, to the Senate chamber and to the House chamber.
Yep, I did my tour of that a few years back. I took my son with me, and it was a surreal experience to actually be in the place where everything happens.
It was momentous, and it was sacred in a way, I think.
Absolutely.
And to see that, which I consider to be national sacred ground, to have been desecrated by violent attacks and people screaming to kill the vice president is just an abomination to me. And I reacted viscerally on that day, and I feel those emotions rising in me again today as we observe the anniversary of it. And I feel that this must be responded to, that those who perpetrated this must be prosecuted, and they must receive justice. And I feel that I wish the administration, I trust the administration at this point, but I wish they would act more quickly and more expediently to do that, because I feel it is so important. It is such an important statement to make, to say, you made a significant national violation of what we hold dear and what we hold sacred, and that will not stand.
Yep, I was.
Hey, Beowulf, let me interrupt here. This is a very fortuitous time. I have an email question from one of our listeners, Ty Huttenhoff, and her question is, given this topic and what you're just talking about, what is your opinion on the, Merrick Garland's address that he gave in front of the country in the past 24 hours? Do you think it was right on and where it should be? Do you think that it needs some tweaking?
Well, I agree with the Attorney General's words. I just wish that it was a speech that had been given in the days or the weeks or perhaps even the months after January 6th, 2021, instead of an entire year after January 6th, 2021. I wish, I understand that when you're dealing with a legal case, that you have to build it, and sometimes that process is methodical and appears to be slow from the outside. But even symbolically, I feel that it is so important to repudiate officially this desecration that was made upon our country, that I would hope for even more rigor in the process of doing that, because I think it is so important. And I feel that there is a myth that is building up on the far right in this country that it really wasn't so bad after all.
Oh yeah.
And I think that we are lending credence to that when we take things so slowly and we hedge about specifically what has been done. I have no problem with his words, but I just wish that action were taken more expeditiously.
I agree with you. When he's coming along like a year after and saying that the Justice Department remains committed to holding all January 6th perpetrators at any level accountable under law. I'm kind of quoting what he said, whether they were present that day or were otherwise criminally responsible. Now, this sentence is kind of grabbing me. He's not just talking about the people who were present that day. He's also saying, or were otherwise criminally responsible for the assault on our democracy. So I wonder what he means by those people that were not there but were criminally responsible. Is that pointing out towards the White House by any chance?
Well, I hope so. I hope it goes all the way up. I hope it goes up the ladder through Steve Bannon and Mark Meadows and Bernie Kerik and all the way to the top to Donald J. Trump. Well, I certainly hope so. I wish that had been stated explicitly, and I understand the desire to avoid something direct like that. But it seems like in this case, when you're dealing with the people that you're dealing with, that perhaps more direct action could have been taken. I hope that's what he meant.
Yeah, because so far the prosecutions that have resulted, from the probe, basically have focused on the individual rioters who physically breached the Capitol complex, rather than high-profile figures like the former president and his allies, right, who promoted bogus election fraud narratives that many of the rioters have said served as the motivation for the January 6th attack. So even though he did not specifically mention Trump or anyone else who may be under investigation for their role, Garland has assured the public that the Justice Department has not concluded its efforts. He said, and I'm quoting him again, that the actions we have taken thus far will not be our last. That to me sounds, give me a little bit of hope.
I hope so. That is hopeful. But when I think of the concept of a speedy trial, which is written into the Constitution, certainly that does not seem to be this. And it regardless of what the ultimate outcome is of these, and hopefully many of these individuals will be charged not just with trespassing and disruption, but hopefully something more along the lines of insurrection, sedition, rebellion. I think charges along those lines as well are warranted. I fear that while there is this elongated pause in action being taken, that they are using that time to build a consensus within this core of extremists that unfortunately exists in our country, that is being fostered by media figures on the right that we see, some of whom, like Sean Hannity, are being asked to cooperate with the investigation, and that is precipitating, more circumstances where there can be, violence and destruction of this sort.
Yeah, because according to the Justice Department now, and I'm looking at some of the figures that they put out, approximately 165 of those arrested thus far have pleaded guilty, to a variety of federal charges, 145 of which were for misdemeanors. Yeah. And just 70 defendants have been sentenced to jail time for their crimes. Of those cases, only, of the cases that have been adjudicated so far, only 30 have been sentenced to serve time in prison. That is really not giving out a good message to the people on the far right. They're like, yeah, so what? It's a slap on the wrist. We're going to do it again. I think, most of these people have received such mild penalties as, house arrest or parole, man.
Yeah. I agree. And when you see individual after individual, such as Mark Meadows and Steve Bannon, refuse to testify before or cooperate with the January 6th committee, you see so far a lack of consequences for the action of planning this. and the more that message gets sent, I think the more in danger we are of this recurring. And when you have that simultaneously occurring with a background of the programs that President Biden is putting forward, like the Build Back Better program, being stymied in Congress, so that while the stick is not being actively used, also the carrot is not able to be given. So the healing, the programs that could help to heal our country and help put us back on track, and that could help people gravitate less towards this kind of extremism, are also being stopped. I feel that we have to take aggressive action to send a message that this is not acceptable.
Now, there seems to be also an undercurrent now, especially on the right side, on the extreme right side, that they are kind of coming up with this, idea that they're trying to plant into our minds now and our heads now, that, the country might be heading towards civil war. Yes. Is that a deliberate move, or is that, it's something that I am misreading?
Well, no, I think you're correct about that, Mohammed. It is something, frankly, and I have worked in conservative talk radio, and I have heard and been aware of these fringe elements. And I will tell you that, going back, 10 or 15 years, I've heard people on the very far right talking about the idea of civil war. It really has only been in the last couple of years that it has come into a mainstream conversation. But I have a feeling, as you're sort of indicating, that they're almost trying to wish it into existence. They're trying to manifest a conflict, because the traditional means that in our democracy we have to getting things done, they have the ability to stop things, but they don't have the ability to make things happen through legitimate means. And so it seems like there are a very small number of malefactors here who are attempting to manifest a conflict where one is not warranted, in order for them to achieve their extremist political ends. So I think you're completely right about that.
Well, I think Ken has got another question that came in from one of our listeners. Ken, go ahead.
Yes, actually, I had mentioned last week that you were going to be on the show, and you were with the Keith Unger show, and one of our listeners wanted to know, what is the most memorable interview that you helped produce for that show? What stands out to you beyond most others?
So, I've done a lot of interviews for the program, and I've done a lot of interviews overall in my career. Is as far as the Rick Unger show goes. Gosh, there's so many. Rick was so good at getting into like real deep policy issues with folks. He is not one that shied away from that at all. Many talk radio hosts will go into just kind of broad characterizations and take dramatic positions in order to gin up listenership. He is one who really wanted to flesh out the issues. And goodness, I mean, there's so many different ones that I could pick from. I guess probably, there was an interview that he had with Congressman John Larson of Connecticut, where he was going into healthcare policy, and it seemed to me like there was a moment there that the congressman realized, well, this is not just your typical talk show host. This is someone who really both cares about and understands the ins and outs of this issue. And he started, speaking with him in the manner more of a colleague than a talk radio host. And so, as far as the Rick Unger show goes, I would say, booking and having on the air John Larson, that was really amazing. As far as my personal experience, I was very privileged a few years back to interview former President Jimmy Carter, and that probably is my biggest personal career amazing time that I've ever had.
Well, you forget the times that I was on there.
Well, okay, second to that, of course.
Okay, I just had to bring that in. Okay. No, but one of the things that really impressed me about how you guys were doing the Rick Unger show was the variety of topics that you would come up with, on a consistent basis. It's not easy to come up with those topics, right? How did that process go?
It was very collaborative. I mean, Rick had a set of issues that he wanted to cover, and a set number of interviews or segments that he definitely wanted to do. But it was also very open in terms of ideas for topics or guests that I wanted to come up with. We would present him with different possibilities. He would present me and my team with different possibilities, and we would go after all of it. I've got to say, to Rick's credit again, he is just one of the most open and curious and engaged talk show hosts that I've ever worked with. He doesn't, he has a position, but he doesn't have an agenda. And that was really one of the wonderful things, being able to collaborate with him, being able to suggest guests and say, hey, yeah, go after that person, even if he didn't necessarily fit in with where Rick's position on things ended up being. So I think went like that.
I think you nailed it when you said that he had a position, but he did not have an agenda. And most of the talking heads that I see now, they have an agenda. Okay, they don't have a position that they can hang a hat on, but they do have an agenda that is paid for, by their masters who are calling their tunes, and that is what is dividing our country and splitting us into, the right wing and the left wing and the moderates and all the names that are coming out there. And I think that is part of what has created the mentality of these people who came and attacked the Capitol on January 6th.
Yeah, no, I think you're absolutely right about that. I feel like I am in kind of a unique position in that way, and it's a reason that I'm so glad that I was involved in the Rick Unger show. I grew up in a very liberal place in Marin County, California. I grew up in a very conservative, gun-owning family, and then I went out into the world. I went to a liberal university, UC Santa Cruz. I ended up working for some very conservative people in talk radio. And so that exposure has forced me, and I think we should all make an effort to do this, to have to relate to people who have a different point of view than you do. It is so important to have the ability to put yourself into somebody else's shoes, to have empathy with somebody else and what they're going through, even though you maybe perhaps at first recoil from who they are or what they're doing. If we all understood each other a little bit more, and I have very strong views. I'm very much to the left, probably much more so than Rick in many ways. But one thing I always try to keep with me is, let's talk to each other. Let's engage with one another, and let's not disregard one another because of labels that we put on each other.
Well, and again, I caught something in what you said just now, that we have to have the ability to put ourselves in other people's shoes in order to have a cogent conversation. And for that, I have always believed, Beowulf, that in order to get into some other people's shoes, you have to take off your shoes first. You can't go and put yourself in.
I've never. You have to have a pretty large pair of shoes to go over the ones that I'm wearing. So I think that's a good idea.
Okay, so you have to have that, because at the end of the day, we are Americans first and last. All the other labels can come in later. I mean, what makes this country great? And, I migrated here almost 40 years back now from India, and, have not regretted a single day of why did I come over here. And it's been a continuous, journey of learning from people, learning from others, and getting to know and know them, their issues, and see what my skills are and how can I help them achieve their goals. And if more people, start thinking like that, I think we got a great future for the country still. I mean, I'm not going to give up on this.
Well, neither am I. I have moments of despair. I have moments of anguish. I have moments of rage, but I think we all do need to come together here, that there is a fundamental American project that we can foster and create more wonderful things from. As many problems as we have, as many adversities as we encounter, and many of them come from ourselves and from our own people. I think we can transcend that and create an even more perfect union than we've had this whole time.
Well, and on that thought, let's end up our conversation for the day today, folks. Our guest today has been Beowulf Rochlen, who is a talk radio producer, and he's got his own podcast going up now called Facepalm America. And please tune in to Facepalm America also on the podcast, and we will be putting up links on our website to Beowulf's, podcast also. Thank you so much for your time. And any final thought for our listeners before we let you go?
Well, Mohammed, thank you so much for having me on. It was a real pleasure speaking with you. And I would just encourage people to remember this day, January 6th, what happened on it. Let's not forget it. And let's use the memory of what happened a year ago to move us away from negativity and towards greatness.
Wonderful. Thank you
so much for joining us, Beowulf. And thank you for tuning into the Turning Point podcast. To leave a question on our voicemail, please call 312-816-7174. That's 312-816-7174. Or you can send an email to the turningpointpodcast.com. Our next show will be interviewing Joey Carr, who came in second place on America's Got Talent. And he's going to share with us some of the behind-the-scenes experiences he had on the #1 rated reality show. So that'll be kind of interesting. And Beowulf, thank you so much again for joining us. We really appreciate it.
Thank you so much, guys.
Thank you, guys.